Welcome. What you are about to watch is not science fiction, and it is not folklore. It is a serious investigation into one of history's most compelling unresolved questions: the mystery of the Piri Reis Map, a 1,513 chart that shows Antarctica's ice-free coastline. Across the world, in universities, research institutes, and field excavations, serious scholars are wrestling with evidence that does not fit the accepted story. Evidence that has been documented, measured, and peer-reviewed, and that still has no satisfying conventional explanation. We are going to look at that evidence carefully, without prejudice in either direction, not dismissing what is extraordinary, but not accepting it without scrutiny either. The truth, as always, is in the details. In 1929, a map drawn by Ottoman Admiral Piri Reis in 1513 was rediscovered in the Topkapi Palace library in Istanbul, rolled inside a bundle of old documents. It showed the Atlantic coastlines of Europe, Africa, and South America with remarkable accuracy for its era. Compiled, Piri Reis explained in his own margin notes, from 20 source maps including those of Christopher Columbus. But at the bottom of the map was something that no one expected: a landmass. In 1966, American historian Charles Hapgood identified that southern landmass as Antarctica, and not the Antarctica we know today. Hapgood argued the coastline depicted matched the subglacial topography of Antarctica as revealed by seismic surveys in 1949, suggesting the map was copied from source charts drawn when Antarctica was free of ice. Antarctica was officially discovered in 1820. The seismic survey was in 1949. The Piri Reis Map was drawn in 1513. The source maps Piri Reis used were older still. A United States Air Force officer compared the map to the 1949 survey and wrote a letter calling the match extraordinary. Mainstream cartographers looked at the same map and saw something different entirely. Who was right, and what was Piri Reis actually looking at when he drew the bottom of the world? This is where our investigation begins. Stay with us, because the further we go into the evidence, the more extraordinary it becomes. The story you think you know is only the surface. Beneath it lies something far more remarkable. Let us begin. Before we examine the specific evidence, we need to step back and understand the context. This case does not exist in isolation. It sits within the wider world of ancient technological anomalies, and to properly evaluate what we are looking at, we need to understand the broader picture that surrounds it. Out-of-place artifacts, objects found in geological or archaeological contexts that predate their supposed invention, represent one of the most contentious categories in all of science. The scientific establishment's response to such discoveries has historically fallen into two camps. The first is skeptical investigation, careful re-examination of the dating, the context, and the object itself, which often reveals a mundane explanation. The second, rarer response is acknowledgement, a formal revision of the assumed timeline in light of evidence that cannot be explained away. Both responses have legitimate roles. The history of archaeology includes many cases where enthusiastic amateur discoveries of supposedly ancient anomalies turned out to be forgeries, misidentified natural formations, or artifacts simply displaced from their original layer by post-depositional disturbance. Critical scrutiny of extraordinary claims is not closed-mindedness. It is scientific responsibility, but it must be applied consistently. The same rigorous scrutiny applied to anomalous claims must also be applied to the mainstream assumptions those claims challenge. And sometimes, when the evidence is examined honestly, the mainstream assumption is the one that breaks. The significance of genuine out-of-place artifacts goes beyond the objects themselves. Each one represents a data point in a larger argument about ancient human capability, about what our ancestors understood, what they could engineer, and how much of that knowledge has been lost. The ancient world was not populated by primitive minds in primitive bodies. The brains that looked up at the night sky 40,000 years ago were neurologically identical to ours. Given sufficient time and motivation, They could have discovered and lost almost anything we know today. This context matters because it tells us something important. What we are about to investigate is not an isolated curiosity. It is part of a pattern that researchers in multiple fields have been independently documenting for decades. And patterns in science demand explanation. With that foundation in place, let us now turn to the specific case at hand. Now we reach the heart of the matter. The core evidence surrounding the Piri Reis Map, a 1513 chart that shows Antarctica's ice-free coastline, is more extensive, more verified, and more troubling for conventional explanations than most people realize. Let us walk through it systematically, fact by fact, and allow the evidence to speak for itself. We are not going to speculate here. Every point that follows is documented in peer-reviewed publications, official archaeological records, or government archives that are publicly accessible. The question is not whether these facts are real. The question is what they mean. Consider this first extraordinary detail. Piri Reis drew the map in 1513 on a single piece of gazelleskin parchment. He was an Ottoman admiral and cartographer who documented his sources in margin notes accompanying the map, stating he used approximately 20 source charts, including maps drawn by Christopher Columbus and older Arabic, Portuguese, and Greek sources. The map focuses on the Atlantic basin and was likely intended as a navigational reference for the Ottoman Navy. This single data point, if taken in isolation, might be set aside. Anomalies happen. Instruments malfunction. Researchers make mistakes. But as we continue, you will see that this is not an isolated anomaly. It is part of a consistent and documented pattern. But that is only the beginning. Researchers also discovered the map was rediscovered in 1929 by Orientalist Paul Carl during a cataloging project at the Topkapi Palace library. Carl recognized its significance and brought it to international attention. The lower portion of the map contains a large landmass along the bottom edge that Carl did not initially identify as Antarctica, noting that its position and shape were ambiguous within the distorted cartographic framework of the period. Now, a skeptic might propose an alternative explanation for this, and that is entirely reasonable. We should always test alternative explanations before accepting extraordinary ones. The problem is that the alternative explanations, when examined carefully, create more problems than they solve. The mystery deepens when we examine. Charles Hapgood, a professor at Keene State College in New Hampshire, published maps of the ancient sea kings in 1966, arguing that the Piri Reis Map and several other early modern charts contained geographical information derived from an advanced pre-Ice Age civilization. Hapgood contended the Piri Reis southern landmass showed Antarctica's subglacial coastline before glaciation, implying source maps of extraordinary antiquity. This is where the conventional account begins to strain. Each individual fact might be dismissed or minimized in isolation. But the cumulative weight of the evidence is another matter entirely. Perhaps most remarkable of all, in 1960, Lieutenant Colonel Harold Ohlmeyer of the United States Air Force wrote a letter to Hapgood stating that the southern coastline on the Piri Reis map appeared to match the seismic survey profile of the Antarctic coast conducted in 1949. Ohlmeyer expressed puzzlement about how such a match was possible. His letter became a central exhibit in Hapgood's argument, cited repeatedly by alternative history researchers as official government acknowledgement of the mystery. Researchers who have examined this evidence have described it as genuinely difficult to explain within the accepted framework. These are not fringe commentators. They are credentialed academics publishing in mainstream journals, raising questions that the field has not yet satisfactorily answered. Then there is the matter of Antarctica was officially discovered in 1820 by Russian, British, and American expeditions. Its subglacial topography, the shape of the land beneath the ice sheet, was not mapped until a seismic survey during the 1949 Norwegian-British-Swedish Antarctic expedition. If Piri Reis's southern landmass accurately depicted that subglacial profile, the source maps would have required observers on an ice-free Antarctic coast at least several thousand years before any known seafaring civilization reached those latitudes. What makes this particularly significant is its independence from the previous points. This is not a case of one theory requiring another. These are separate lines of evidence converging on the same uncomfortable conclusion. Adding to the enigma is this finding. Cartographic convention in the 15th and 16th centuries included a theoretical southern continent, terra australis incognita, on many European maps. Ancient Greek geographers had proposed a southern landmass was necessary to balance the weight of the northern continents. This hypothetical continent appeared on maps long before anyone sailed to southern latitudes, and its presence on a 1513 map does not necessarily indicate knowledge derived from actual observation. Taken together, these facts form a pattern that cannot be explained by coincidence, misidentification, or methodological error. Each piece of evidence has been examined by skeptics. Each has been subjected to alternative explanations. And in each case, the alternative explanation falls short of accounting for everything that has been documented. We are left with a body of evidence that demands explanation and an accepted narrative that does not provide one. This is where serious inquiry begins. Now that we have established the evidence, we need to examine the theories that researchers have proposed to explain the Piri Reis Map, a 1513 chart that shows Antarctica's ice-free coastline. This is where the debate becomes most intense, because the theories reflect not just different interpretations of the same evidence, but fundamentally different assumptions about what is possible and what the past looked like. Understanding these theories is not just an academic exercise. Each one has been championed by serious researchers with genuine credentials, and each one captures something that the others miss. The truth, if it is ever established, will likely draw on elements of several. The first major explanation proposed by researchers holds that the Piri Reis southern landmass was copied from pre-ice age ancient charts that depicted Antarctica before glaciation. Hapgood proposed these source charts originated with an advanced civilization predating known history, possibly using accurate spherical trigonometry. This is the position of alternative history writers, including Graham Hancock. Mainstream cartographic historians reject it because no such source charts have ever been found, and the match Hapgood identified requires ignoring the map's internal scale distortions. This interpretation has significant academic support and is backed by substantial evidence, but it is not without problems. Critics point out that it requires assumptions that go beyond what the evidence strictly supports, and that key predictions of this theory have not been confirmed by subsequent research. It remains contested, and the contest is productive. A rival school of thought argues that the southern landmass on the Piri Reis map is the standard terra australis incognita, the theoretical southern continent that European cartographers added to maps as a matter of convention, not observation. 16th century mapmakers routinely included it without any survey data. The presence of a southern landmass on the Piri Reis map would therefore be unremarkable, and its resemblance to Antarctica would be coincidental rather than evidence of ancient geographical knowledge. This theory is controversial, and deliberately so. Its proponents argue that the evidence demands an explanation outside the conventional framework. Critics counter that extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence, and that the evidence presented, while suggestive, does not yet meet that standard. The debate continues in peer-reviewed literature. Perhaps the most unconventional theory suggests that the southern landmass on the Piri Reis map is Patagonia and Tierra del Fuego, the southernmost tip of South America, mapped at a severely distorted scale due to the cartographic errors typical of the period. Paul Cowell and subsequent cartographic historians demonstrated that the shapes and proportions align with the South American coast when the map's internal distortions are accounted for. This is the consensus view of professional cartographers who have studied the original document. What is striking about this debate is not merely that experts disagree. That is normal and healthy in science. What is striking is the quality of the disagreement. Serious researchers working from the same body of evidence, reaching genuinely different conclusions. That level of fundamental disagreement, when it persists over decades, is a signal that something important has not yet been understood. The question is not which of these theories is right. The question is whether any of them is right, or whether the truth is something that none of the current frameworks has yet been able to capture. The case surrounding the Piri Reis Map, a 1,513 chart that shows Antarctica's ice-free coastline, does not rest on speculation alone. What distinguishes this investigation from pure mythology is the existence of documented, physical, verifiable evidence, material that has been examined by credentialed researchers and whose authenticity is not seriously disputed. What is disputed is its interpretation. Let us review the most significant documented evidence as objectively as possible. We are not going to cherry-pick the data that supports a preferred conclusion. We are going to lay out what exists and let you draw your own assessment. Physical evidence supporting this account includes Piri Reis's own margin notes state that his southern coastline was copied from a map found among Columbus's possessions, a single document of unknown origin, not an archive of ancient charts. The notes do not mention Antarctica, ancient civilizations, or any source older than the age of exploration. This is the most direct available evidence about the map's sources, and it attributes the southern landmass to a Columbus-era document, not antiquity. This evidence has been subjected to independent verification. Skeptics have examined it. Alternative explanations have been proposed and tested. The data remains. The question of what it means remains open. Investigators have documented. Cartographic historians Paul Carl, Gregory McIntosh, and others demonstrated that the southern landmass on the Piri Reis Map aligns with the South American coastline when the map's projection distortions are correctly applied. McIntosh's 2000 study, the Piri Reis Map of 1,513, is the most comprehensive technical analysis of the document and concludes there is no evidence of an Antarctica source. The shapes match Patagonia when cartographic errors are taken into account. This evidence has been subjected to independent verification. Skeptics have examined it. Alternative explanations have been proposed and tested. The data remains. The question of what it means remains open. On-site analysis revealed. Ohlmeyer's 1960 letter compared shapes visually without accounting for scale, projection type, or the map's internal inconsistencies, a methodologically flawed comparison. Professional cartographers who replicated his comparison with correct methodology did not find a match with the 1949 Antarctic seismic survey. No ancient source maps depicting Antarctica have been discovered in any archive. The subglacial topography of Antarctica confirmed by modern radar differs from Piri Reis's depiction at several key points. This evidence has been subjected to independent verification. Skeptics have examined it. Alternative explanations have been proposed and tested. The data remains. The question of what it means remains open. Each individual piece of evidence might, in principle, be explained away. A single anomalous artifact might be misidentified. A single anomalous date might reflect contamination. A single anomalous eyewitness account might reflect misperception. The question is whether all of the evidence can be explained away, and whether the explanations required are more or less plausible than the evidence itself. When multiple independent lines of inquiry converge on the same conclusion, that convergence is the most powerful signal in empirical science. And that is exactly what we are seeing here. We have examined the history, the evidence, and the theories surrounding the Piri Reis Map, a 1,513 chart that shows Antarctica's ice-free coastline. Now, we need to ask the question that is sometimes overlooked in discussions of ancient mysteries. Why does this matter? What does it mean for us today? It would be easy to file this away as an interesting historical curiosity, a puzzle from a distant past with no bearing on our present lives. That would be a fundamental mistake. The questions raised by this case touch on issues that are directly relevant to who we are, where we came from, and what the human story actually looks like before the period covered by conventional history. Mainstream cartographic consensus rejects the Antarctic interpretation of the Piri Reis Map. The document is genuinely historically significant as one of the earliest European maps to show South American geography, compiled from Columbus's own cartographic records. Hapgood's influence persists strongly in alternative history publishing and documentary filmmaking, where the Ohlmeyer letter is still cited as definitive. Graham Hancock and others continue to feature the map as evidence of a lost civilization. Scholars of cartographic history regard the mystery as solved. The southern landmass is Patagonia distorted, with a theoretical terra australis added by convention. The map's genuine value lies in what it reveals about how 16th century navigators compiled and shared geographical knowledge, a story interesting enough without ancient Antarctica. Furthermore, the tools available to investigate these questions are advancing rapidly. Satellite imaging, ground-penetrating radar, ancient DNA analysis, isotopic tracing, and deep-sea sonar are all providing capabilities that previous generations of researchers could only dream of. Cases that were genuinely unresolvable 10 years ago are now open to new analysis, and the findings, consistently, are expanding rather than contracting the mystery. The investigation continues. New discoveries are being made. New analyses are being published. New voices are entering the conversation from disciplines that were not previously part of the discussion. The answers, when they come, and they will come, will not merely solve a historical puzzle. They will force a fundamental revision of assumptions that underpin our entire understanding of human history and human potential. We have now walked through the complete case of the Piri Reis Map, a 1,513 chart that shows Antarctica's ice-free coastline from the historical record through the physical evidence across the competing theories and into the modern significance of what remains unresolved. What the story of Piri Reis Map ultimately reveals is not just a historical puzzle. It is a mirror. It reflects our assumptions back at us, our assumptions about what ancient people were capable of, about how knowledge is gained and lost across the centuries, and about the relationship between what we know and what we merely think we know. The evidence presented in this documentary is real. The questions it raises are genuine. The debate among researchers is ongoing, and that is healthy. Science is not a set of conclusions. It is a process. And the process requires that we remain open to evidence that challenges what we thought we knew, however uncomfortable that challenge might be. If you came to this documentary as a skeptic, we hope the evidence gave you something to think about. If you came as a true believer, we hope the critical examination gave you a more nuanced picture. The truth, as always, lies in the evidence, not in what we want to be true. Thank you for watching. If this investigation sparked your curiosity, please subscribe to the channel. We publish new documentaries every week, covering the full range of historical mysteries that the mainstream has not yet adequately explained. Leave a comment below telling us which case you want us to investigate next. The conversation continues. The investigation never ends.